The smell of fried snacks and soda filled the air in the party room, mixed with the stifling heat and amplified echo of excited voices. For 7-year-old Davy, who has autism, it was sensory hell. Loud music vibrating through the floor, the cacophony of children's laughter and adult shouts, the flashing of a camera. He was huddled in a corner, clutching a small astronaut doll to his chest, his eyes fixed on the complex pattern of the wallpaper, seeking visual refuge. His mother, Mariana, tried in vain to calm him down as the party continued in full swing. Mrs. Valeria, the party hostess and wealthy businesswoman, a woman of impeccable posture and cold smile, paraded through the hall, completely ignoring Davy, as if he were an inconvenient blur in her perfect event. She stopped right in front of them, turned her face away with an air of contempt, and whispered to her assistant, Claudia, "Next time, suggest that they don't bring problematic children. They disrupt the atmosphere. It's not the kind of energy we want." Claudia nodded, casting a pitying glance at Mariana and a look of disdain at Davy. Mariana felt her face burn with humiliation. Davy, oblivious to the words, suddenly pointed at Mrs. Valeria, his eyes, which had seemed lost before, fixed on her with a disturbing intensity, and then in a clear whisper, but laden with a deep melancholy that echoed in the silence that formed between them, Davy said, "Your eyes, they're crying inside, just like my father's." Mrs. Valeria stopped, her expression of contempt giving way to terror. Her body stiffened, and a silent tear rolled down her cheek, not out of obvious sadness, but out of shock and absolute terror. What did he mean? The autistic boy she ignored and despised knew a secret she kept locked away, an intimate pain that consumed her and that no one else knew about. In the small, simple apartment, far from the glitz of the ballroom, Mariana vented to her friend Fernanda while trying to organize Davy's toys. The scene from the party replayed in her mind, the humiliation of Valeria's gaze, the cutting words that hit her hard. "Fernanda, I can't take it anymore. What happened today at the party? Mrs. Valeria made me feel like trash, as if Davy were a nuisance in her life and mine. And he said that. Your eyes cry inside. I don't know how he did that. He doesn't talk to people like that. He barely communicates. He lives in his own world." Mariana's voice broke, tears streaming freely down her tired face. "I love him so much, Fernanda. Davy is my life, my reason for being. But I feel so alone in this daily struggle. Since the autism diagnosis, it feels like the whole world has turned its back on us, isolating us on an island of incomprehension. Davy's father, Tiago, abandoned us as soon as he found out. He said it wasn't the life he wanted, that he couldn't have a different, special child. My family, my mother says I should be stronger, that he needs strict boundaries. No one understands that Davy lives in a world of sensations that overwhelm him at every moment. The phrases he repeats, the way he sways his body, it's his way of protecting himself, of regulating himself, of finding refuge. But to the world, to society, he's just the weird kid, the problem child who disrupts order. I've tried everything, Fernanda. Therapy, doctors, diets, whatever they tell me. But prejudice is everywhere. It shows in every glance. People stare at us on the streets. Places close their doors to us. Doors are locked. And Mrs. Valeria, the way she treated him, as if he had no soul, as if he weren't a human being. And he, in his innocence and sensitivity, let it slip. What secret is Valeria hiding that Davy was able to see? I feel like I no longer have the strength to protect Davy, to fight for him. He is so sensitive, so pure in his essence, and the world is so cruel, so hostile. I blame myself, Fernanda. I blame myself for not being able to change this reality for him, for not being able to create a shield to protect him from all this pain. I'm drowning. And Davy, my little Davy, is drowning with me in a sea of judgment and indifference, and I don't know what to do anymore. Mariana's tears mixed with the smoke from the pan, a pain that seemed endless, an open wound in her soul. Mariana's life with Davy after his autism diagnosis turned into a relentless search for any ray of hope, even if it was false or illusory. The first light came with the recommendation of a holistic therapist, the enlightened Master Orion, who promised quantum reconnection for autistic children. Your son is disconnected from universal energy, my daughter. With purification rituals and crystals, he will return to the natural flow of life, Orion proclaimed, with a mystical air and a smile that seemed to predict fortunes and manipulate the faith of the desperate. Mariana, desperate, sold what little she had and spent her last savings on expensive sessions that involved Davy sitting in circles of salt and stones, surrounded by strong incense that made him agitated and caused crying and panic attacks. The rituals were sensory torture, with no real benefit to Davy. Master Orion, seeing the lack of progress and Mariana's exhaustion, simply dismissed her, claiming that Davy's energy was too blocked, and there was nothing more he could do. The second salvation came from a neighbor who claimed to be a friend, who promised Mariana a job as a cleaner in Mrs. Valeria's party hall. "It's a fancy place, Mari. You'll earn good money and you can take the boy with you. He'll stay quiet in a corner without bothering the guests," said the neighbor, in a tone that suggested she was doing her a big favor, but hid her ulterior motives. Mariana, desperately in need of money and a place to stay with Davy, accepted, seeing a chance to start over. However, the job turned out to be a cruel and exploitative trap. Mrs. Valeria, the wealthy businesswoman, treated her with utter contempt, always reminding her of her inferior position and the favor she was doing by employing her. Claudia, the assistant, was always giving her extra tasks and humiliating Mariana and Davy in public, especially when he exhibited more obvious autistic behavior. The party hall, which looked like an oasis of luxury and celebration, became a stage for daily exploitation and humiliation, where Davy was just a nuisance and Mariana, a shadow, an exploited and silent worker. The biggest disappointment, however, came from the absence of justice and the persistence of prejudice. After the incident at the party where Davy was called a mania and a problem, Mariana tried to talk to Mrs. Valeria, hoping for an apology or at least a little respect and understanding. Mrs. Valeria, with an icy stare and a cutting coldness, simply said, "Mrs. Mariana, I suggest you control your son or find another job. I can't have problems with my guests. My reputation is at stake." The false hope of finding a place of respect and support crumbled completely, leaving Mariana and Davy even more vulnerable and adrift. The truth was that, in Mrs. Valeria's world, they were just an inconvenience, a problem to be discarded, and Davy's pain was invisible to her, totally irrelevant. The atmosphere in the ballroom, amid balloons and confetti, was an invisible battlefield, and Davy, in his innocence and vulnerability, was the main target. Mrs. Valeria, the wealthy businesswoman as cold as marble, made a point of ignoring Davy's existence, as if his presence tarnished the perfection of her luxurious event. When David, due to sensory overload, began to sway his body or make repetitive sounds, Mrs. Valeria looked at him with contempt and whispered to her assistant Claudia, "Take him to the kitchen. He's disturbing the guests. Children like that don't understand etiquette. They don't belong in places like this." Claudia nodded with a forced smile, came over and tried to take David away by force, increasing the boy's panic and distress. Mariana, Davy's mother, was the embodiment of humiliation and silent pain. She felt the weight of the curious and judgmental stares of the wealthy guests, the whispers about the employee with the weird son. Mrs. Valeria never missed an opportunity to belittle her. At a party in front of all the guests, Valeria scolded her for a supposed stain on the floor that didn't exist. "Mariana, you're not even good at cleaning. Your work is fifth-rate. And your son? He's a walking problem. I don't know what's worse for the image of my events." Her voice was poison, each word a stab, and the guests laughed or looked away in false pity, silent accomplices to the humiliation. The inner pain that Mrs. Valeria kept a secret was the tragic loss of her only son, Daniel, years earlier. Daniel had autism, and Valeria, in her youth and inexperience, never knew how to deal with him. She hid him from society, over-medicated him, and bitterly regretted her neglect and inability to love after his death. The laughter of her assistant, Claudia, who did not know Valeria's secret, was a reflection of social judgment. The same laughter that Valeria feared she would receive in relation to Daniel, the same laughter she felt she deserved. This secret, this overwhelming guilt, made her even more bitter, cruel, and intolerant of Davy. a painful mirror of her own failure and regret. On the day of the incident at the party, Davi, amid the sensory chaos that surrounded him, noticed Mrs. Valeria's gaze. He didn't see the expensive clothes or the flawless makeup. He saw the pain in her eyes, a pain so deep and familiar that he recognized it immediately. The same pain he saw on his father's face when he walked away, when he left. Davy's voice, which rarely manifested itself in clear words, came from a place of pure empathy, from a soul connection. Your eyes, they're crying inside, just like my father's. The words hit Mrs. Valeria like a bolt of lightning, breaking through her armor of ice and revealing her vulnerability. The truth that no one wanted to tell was about to be revealed by the boy she despised the most. A plot twist that would change the lives of everyone in the hall forever, exposing the masks and hypocrisies. Davy's whisper hung in the air of the ballroom, freezing every guest, every employee, every laugh. Mrs. Valeria, motionless, felt the boy's words pierce her soul, exposing a wound she had kept hidden for decades, a wound of guilt and regret. Your eyes, they're crying inside, just like my father's. That was impossible. No one, absolutely no one knew of her pain, her guilt, her greatest loss, her son, Daniel, who had autism, whom she had failed to love and understand, whom she had hidden from the world out of shame. Her own pain, her own unresolved grief, her own parental abandonment, all resurfaced with David's pure voice, like a ghost from the past. The image of her son, whom she had tried to erase from her memory, resurfaced with the force of a tsunami. A silent tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it was not from shock. It was from excruciating and uncontrollable suffering. The assistant, Claudia, and the guests, perplexed, looked at Mrs. Valeria, who was breaking down in front of everyone. Claudia, the first to speak, tried to intervene. "Davy, stop it. You're making Mrs. Valeria nervous. Don't say things like that." But Valeria, with a slow, trembling movement of her hand, silenced her, her red, swollen eyes fixed on Davy, as if he were the only person in the world. She knelt right there on the floor of the luxurious ballroom, ignoring the expensive clothes, her disheveled hair, and the shocked stares of everyone watching her. How do you know about this? How do you know about my son?" Her voice was a lament, almost inaudible, punctuated by sobs. Davy, with the simplicity and purity of an autistic child, pointed to the little astronaut doll in his hands. "My father also cried inside. He went to the stars. Yours too?" The connection was clear, painful, and undeniable. Davy's mind, which saw patterns and felt emotions in an amplified way, had deciphered Valeria's most intimate secret, her grief for a son with autism, her guilt for an unrequited love. The turning point was not an eloquent dialogue or a speech. It was the revelation of a painful truth, spoken by the person least expected, by the one considered voiceless, which exposed the hypocrisy of Valeria and all who judged her. The silence in the room was now a mirror of shame for all who had despised Davy. The scene of Mrs. Valeria kneeling on the floor, in tears, talking to Davy, the autistic boy she had ignored so much, paralyzed the room. The guests, who had previously had expressions of curiosity and contempt, now had a mixture of shock, shame, and, for some, incipient compassion on their faces. The first victory was the silence, of respect and compassion, that fell over the room. No one dared to laugh or make malicious comments. The assistant, Claudia, who had previously mocked David and humiliated Mariana, had tears in her eyes as she witnessed her boss's shocking vulnerability and the boy's pure innocence. Valeria hugged Davy, a tight, desperate hug full of remorse, the hug she had never given her own son, Daniel, when he was alive. "My Daniel, you remind me so much of him. My son," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. Then came the understanding and unexpected support from Mariana herself, Davy's mother. She approached, and Valeria, for the first time, looked her in the eyes, not with contempt, but with genuine humility, with a silent plea for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry, Mariana. I was so cruel to you and your son. My Daniel, he was just like Davy. I lost him, and I bitterly regret not understanding him, not accepting him." Mariana, seeing the sincere pain in Valeria's eyes, simply nodded, offering a handshake, a silent gesture of forgiveness from someone who understood the complexity of grief. The greatest victory, however, was the transformation of the ballroom. The next day, Mrs. Valeria, looking different, called a meeting with the entire team and the most loyal guests. Her voice still choked with emotion, but with renewed courage and brutal honesty, she told them about her son Daniel, about the pain that had consumed her for years, and about how Davy, a boy she had openly despised, had made her confront her own truth and her most deeply rooted prejudice. She apologized publicly to Mariana and Davi and announced new policies for her events. The Belleza Única Salon would become a space of inclusion and welcome for everyone, especially neurodiverse people. Davi would no longer be hidden, and Valeria herself committed to learning about autism, sponsoring therapy for underprivileged children, and transforming her business into an example of empathy. The autistic boy who had been ignored and despised not only disarmed a wealthy businesswoman with a painful truth, but with his innocence and unique perception, he forever changed the fate of that salon and the lives of everyone who had once judged him. Mrs. Valeria's breakdown in the salon, triggered by Davy's words, was a cataclysmic event that tore the veil from her perfect life and exposed the raw truth that was consuming her from within. For her, the tears were tears of mourning, of overwhelming guilt, and finally of redemption. The pain of Daniel, her autistic son whom she had failed to love and understand, whom she had hidden from the world, resurfaced with the force of a tsunami. But this time, not to drown her, but to free her from a self-imposed prison. That moment forced her to confront her own deepest prejudices, her superficiality, and the way she transferred her guilt and regret to Davy, a mirror of her own son. For Davy, the experience was purely empathetic. He had no intention of hurting or causing a spectacle. His mind, which perceived emotional patterns with crystal clarity, simply reacted to the pain he felt in Mrs. Valeria, connecting it to his own experience of grief and paternal absence. The silence that isolated him from the world became the bridge to the deepest and truest communication, the kind that transcends words and reaches the soul. He was not sick or strange. He was a soul with extraordinary sensitivity, capable of seeing and feeling what others in their complexity, social blindness, and judgment completely ignored. Mariana, Davy's mother, witnessed not only Valeria's humiliation but also her surprising transformation. She saw the businesswoman's pain, and in the silent forgiveness she offered, she found her own strength and resilience. Valeria's story about Daniel, about guilt and regret, taught Mariana to forgive herself for the mistakes she believed she had made, and to forgive Tiago, Davy's father, who abandoned them. The truth that no one wanted to tell was not just Valeria's secret, but the deep and painful reality of autism in a society that does not understand it, and the overwhelming price paid for ignorance and lack of empathy. Davy's revenge was not about causing pain, but about healing, about teaching that true beauty lies in acceptance and empathy, regardless of wealth, social status, or appearances. Life at the Belleza Única beauty salon and the life of Mrs. Valeria were never the same again, and the transformation, though gradual and challenging, was deeply meaningful and inspiring. Valeria, the wealthy businesswoman who once ignored and despised Davy, became an active and powerful voice in the cause of autism. She not only remodeled her salon to make it more sensory-friendly, a haven of peace, but also invested heavily in awareness and support programs for families with autistic children, using her influence and fortune to make a real difference in the world. Davy and Mariana, far from being inconvenient, became a constant presence at the salon, not as customers or employees, but as living symbols of a new era of inclusion and genuine understanding. Mariana, with her heart finally at peace, found in Valeria an unexpected ally and friend, someone who understood her struggle and her pain. She saw in Davy not only her son, but a true master, whose sensitivity and perception had unveiled truths that adults, with their complexities and defenses, were unable to see. The story of Davy, the autistic boy who disarmed a businesswoman with the truth of his pain, echoed around the world. The truth that no one wanted to tell was that true wealth is not found in money or fame, but in the ability to love, accept, and understand everyone, regardless of their differences, their appearances, or their neurodiversities. Davy's fate, which seemed doomed to invisibility and contempt, was rewritten by the overwhelming force of his empathy and his innate ability to see the pain hidden in souls, transforming prejudice into a path of light. Not all crying sheds tears. Sometimes the deepest pain dwells in a glance, in silence, in a secret kept locked away inside the soul. And true understanding does not come with eloquent words, but with the sensitivity of those who can see the soul, even when it is broken inside. Because true love does not ignore those who are different. It sees the hidden light, the silent tears, the truth that lies beneath, and transforms it into complete acceptance. If the story of David, the autistic boy who disarmed a businesswoman and revealed a painful truth, touched your heart, if you felt the cruelty of indifference and the power of empathy that transforms, then this message is for you, and it needs to be heard by more people around the world. I invite you to be part of this transformation. Leave your comment and share your thoughts. What did this story awaken in you? What lesson do you take away for your life, for your actions? Share this story with someone who needs to hear this truth, this message of hope and courage today, and help us make this message echo everywhere. And if you want to continue to be inspired by stories that transform, that remind us of the power of acceptance and neurodiversity in our world, subscribe to our channel now and turn on the bell. Join our community to amplify these voices and build a place where every soul, in its uniqueness and essence, is seen, valued, and loved. Your voice, your engagement, your empathy can make a difference. Let's sow the seeds of understanding together and amplify the power of accepting love.